Let's talk about Taiwan. You know it as this tech powerhouse, a crucial piece of the puzzle for the US and Asia, and yeah, maybe the one place on Earth that could actually spark a war between superpowers. But here's the thing. To really get what's going on today, you have to rewind the clock, way back, over 75 years to a brutal civil war that, in a lot of ways, is still being fought. And it all starts with one big question.
Right? How did we get here? Well, the answer isn't in today's headlines. It's buried in the rubble of World War II, and in a conflict that would decide the fate of a quarter of the world's population.
So picture this. It's 1945. The world is celebrating because Japan has finally surrendered. World War II is over. But for China, a country that had just lost an unbelievable 20 million people fighting Japan, the peace lasted for about 5 minutes. An alliance, a really fragile one between two bitter enemies, was about to just completely explode. As soon as Japan was out of the picture, it was on. A mad dash started between two groups, Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists and Mao Zedong's communists, to grab control of this massive war-torn country. Now, you gotta understand, these two groups had some serious history. They'd already fought a bloody civil war back in the 30s. The only reason they stopped was because Japan invaded, forcing them into this so-called United Front, which was really just a timeout. So by 1945, all that old hatred, oh yeah, it was coming right back to the surface. And if you were a betting person back then, this would have seemed like a sure thing. I mean, look at this. The nationalists, the KMT, had almost 5 times as many soldiers. They were decked out with American weapons, and the rest of the world saw them as the one true government of China. The communists, they were basically a scrappy insurgency hiding out in the countryside. The US saw another huge war brewing and, they tried to stop it. They sent over General George Marshall to try and broker a peace deal, but honestly, it was mostly just for show. Neither Chiang nor Mao was ever going to share power. They both wanted the whole thing. So they talked peace, but behind the scenes, they were sharpening their knives.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this wasn't just going to be a fight about who had more guns. It was a total clash of ideas about how you even win a war like this in the first place.
The two leaders had completely different playbooks. Chiang Kai-shek, he'd been listening to his Western advisors. His plan was classic military doctrine: go for the cities, control the railways, and land a quick, decisive knockout punch. Mao's strategy? The exact opposite. He didn't care about holding territory. His whole philosophy was, let him have the cities. We'll keep our armies intact, win over the millions of people in the countryside, and just grind them down in a long, drawn-out war. And this one quote from Mao in 1947 just says it all. The nationalists had just captured the communist capital, Yan'an. On paper, it was this huge victory. But Mao basically shrugged. He knew holding a city was a trap. The real prize wasn't a piece of land. It was keeping your army alive to fight another day. Because while the KMT looked so powerful on the outside, on the inside it was a total disaster. They were trying to control way too much territory. Their generals were corrupt and fighting each other. They couldn't get supplies to their own soldiers, and hyperinflation was making money worthless in the areas they held. All this meant morale for the average soldier was just in the gutter. And that internal rot, well, it created the perfect opening. The tide of this war was about to turn, and when it did, it wasn't a trickle. It was an avalanche. The historian Christopher Lowe puts it perfectly here. Every single city the nationalists took over just became another massive headache. It was another garrison they had to defend, another population they had to feed, and another huge drain on their already stretched thin resources. Their victories were actually making them weaker. And then came the knockout blow. In just one single massive campaign up in Manchuria, the Liao Shen campaign, the nationalists lost nearly 500,000 of their absolute best soldiers. These were their elite, American-trained troops. And just like that, they were gone. You just can't recover from a loss like that. And this wasn't a fluke. It happened again in the Hua Hai campaign, one of the biggest battles anywhere in the world since World War II. The communists used this brutally simple playbook. First, you target a vital city. Then, you ambush all the armies they send to try and save it. Then you surround the main force, cut them off from all their food and ammo, and just wait. You let hunger and the cold do the work for you. And here's the really wild part. Every KMT soldier who was captured wasn't just a loss for the nationalists. Nope, they were an immediate gain for the communists. They'd capture these guys, give them a hot meal, a new uniform, and then put them right back on the front lines, fighting for the other side. The communist army was literally getting bigger and stronger from the KMT's defeats. After that, the end came so fast.
By the time the communists marched into Beijing, people noticed something incredible and kind of funny. The victory parade for this communist revolution looked more like an ad for the US military. All the best stuff, the tanks, the jeeps, the big guns, it was all American-made. All of it captured from the nationalists.
So the war on the mainland was pretty much done, but this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. It was the beginning of the bizarre reality that we are all still living with right now. I mean, just look how fast it all fell apart in 1949. It was a total whirlwind. In less than a year, the communists go from taking Beijing to crossing China's biggest river to Mao standing up and declaring a whole new country. By the end of the year, Chiang Kai-shek and what was left of his government were on boats fleeing to Taiwan. And this right here is the single most important sentence you need to understand this entire situation. The shooting mostly stopped, but no peace treaty was ever signed. There was no handshake, no surrender. Legally, technically, the Chinese Civil War is just on an extremely long pause. The communists had a plan to invade Taiwan in 1950, and they probably would have won. But then a war breaks out in a totally different country, Korea. The US, terrified that communism was spreading like a virus, sends its massive 7th Fleet and parks it right in the Taiwan Strait. It was like a giant shield protecting Chiang. And that one move froze the entire conflict in place, creating the strange situation of two Chinas that we've had ever since. In the end, maybe the most honest take on why all this happened came from the man who lost it all, Chiang Kai-shek himself. In 1949, he basically admitted his own party was a corrupt, broken, degenerate mess. It's a shocking confession, and it really tells you everything about the rot that brought him down. And that brings us right back to today. For over 75 years, the entire world has been living with the fallout from this unfinished war. It affects everything from the computer chips in your phone to the balance of military power in the Pacific. Beijing and Taipei are worlds away from what they were in 1949, but they are still locked in the final act of a drama that started decades ago. And the rest of us are just holding our breath, wondering what comes next.